For centuries, sailors came back from long voyages telling the same story. A serpent, longer than their ship, rising out of the water, thick as a barrel, strong enough to crush a hull. Historians wrote it off as myth, sea madness, too much rum, and not enough sleep. But what if the story wasn't a myth at all? What if it was a memory buried somewhere in human instinct of something that actually existed, just 58 million years too early for anyone to have seen it and lived to accurately describe it? This is the true story of Titanoboa, the largest snake to ever exist, and the reason giant serpent legends refuse to die. Let's start with the basic numbers, because they're almost too extreme to process the first time you hear them. Titanoboa grew over 42 feet long. That's longer than a city bus. It's estimated to have weighed over 1,100 kilograms, more than a small car. And unlike modern anacondas or pythons, which are already terrifying at 20 feet, Titanoboa wasn't a freak outlier of its ecosystem. It was the baseline apex predator of an entire prehistoric world. The discovery itself is almost as strange as the animal. In 2009, a team of paleontologists working in the Serpent coal mine in northern Colombia uncovered a set of fossilized vertebrae so large that their first assumption was crocodile, not snake. The bones simply didn't match anything in the known snake fossil record. It took years of comparative analysis against modern boa and anaconda skeletons before researchers were willing to publish what the bones actually implied. A snake nearly twice the length of any living species discovered in rock that was once part of a sweltering equatorial rainforest. Since that first discovery, additional Titanoboa fossils have been recovered from the same mine, including skull fragments that finally let scientists reconstruct not just its size, but its likely hunting behavior and diet with real confidence. Here's where the science gets genuinely strange. Snakes are cold-blooded, meaning their body size is directly limited by the temperature of the environment they live in. Bigger snakes need hotter climates to have enough metabolic energy to move, hunt, and digest. For Titanoboa to reach the size it did, the tropical regions of Earth 58 million years ago had to average around 90 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, significantly hotter than the modern tropics are today. In other words, this snake isn't just a biological anomaly. It's physical proof of what Earth's climate looked like in the aftermath of the extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs. A hot, humid, waterlogged world custom-built to produce something like this. So what did Titanoboa actually do with all that size? Based on fossil evidence and its close relatives among modern constrictors, Titanoboa almost certainly hunted the same way anacondas do today, just scaled up to nightmare proportions. It would have waited submerged in murky swamp water, barely visible, using ambush stealth rather than speed. When prey came close enough, ancient crocodilians, giant turtles, large fish, it would strike, wrap its enormous coils around the animal, and constrict with a force strong enough to stop a heart mid-beat through sheer pressure alone. Death wasn't from suffocation in the way most people assume. It was from cardiac arrest, the pressure literally crushing the circulatory system before the prey ever ran out of air. And Titanoboa wasn't hunting small animals to pad out a diet. Fossil evidence places it in the same swamps as Crocodile, an ancient crocodilian relative, and multiple giant turtle species, meaning Titanoboa was regularly preying on armored, dangerous animals that themselves were apex predators in most other ecosystems. This wasn't a snake picking off easy meals. This was a snake at the very top of a food chain filled with things that would terrify you individually, let alone stacked on top of each other in the same swamp. It's worth pausing here to compare Titanoboa to the other giant snakes that have shown up in the fossil record, because it genuinely stands alone. Gigantophus, an extinct snake from North Africa, reached an impressive 30 feet. Massive by any modern standard, but still a third shorter than Titanoboa. Sanajay, a snake that lived alongside actual dinosaurs in India, was closer to 11 feet, more python-sized than sea monster-sized. None of them approached Titanoboa's scale, which is exactly why its discovery reshaped how paleontologists think about the upper size limits of cold-blooded animals altogether. Before 2009, most scientists assumed a size ceiling existed for snakes based on physics and metabolism. Titanoboa forced an entire field to redraw that ceiling. Now here's the myth-busting section, because there's a persistent claim online that Titanoboa could have eaten a small dinosaur, and that claim doesn't hold up. Titanoboa lived after the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs in the Paleocene epoch, roughly 5 to 10 million years after the asteroid impact. It never coexisted with a single dinosaur. The real story is arguably more interesting than the myth. Titanoboa is proof of what happened after the apocalypse. When the largest predators on Earth vanished overnight, evolution didn't waste any time filling that vacancy, and a snake, of all things, was one of the first animals to claim the throne. So let's go back to the sea serpent legends we opened with. Titanoboa itself wasn't a sea creature. It lived in freshwater swamps and rivers, not open ocean. But here's the connection that matters. For millions of years afterward, descendants of massive constrictor lineages continued evolving in coastal and swamp environments around the world. And as recently as a few hundred years ago, sailors exploring unmapped rivers, deltas, and coastal wetlands in South America and Southeast Asia were encountering genuinely enormous modern anacondas and pythons, animals that, while nowhere near Titanoboa's scale, were still large enough, strange enough, and rarely seen enough to spawn exaggerated stories that grew larger with every retelling. These weren't isolated incidents either. Colonial-era expedition logs from the Amazon and Orinoco river basins repeatedly describe snakes locals warned explorers about, animals described as capable of pulling small boats underwater or swallowing livestock whole. Modern herpetologists generally believe these accounts describe real green anacondas, likely exaggerated in scale through repeated retelling. Cultural fear, and the genuine difficulty of accurately estimating the size of something you only glimpse briefly in murky water before it vanishes. Layer centuries of those real encounters on top of humanity's inherited evolutionary fear of large snakes, a fear some researchers believe is hardwired into primates from millions of years of shared history with actual giant constrictors, and you get exactly the kind of myth that refuses to die, because there's a kernel of biological truth sitting underneath it. This is really the core idea worth sitting with. The sea serpent was never entirely fictional. It was a compressed, exaggerated cultural memory built from three real things layered on top of each other: the genuine existence of Titanoboa and its massive prehistoric relatives, the real, if smaller, giant snakes still living in unexplored waters today, and a deep, ancient fear response that every human still carries. The monster was never made up. It was just misplaced in time and inflated by imagination filling in the gaps. If Titanoboa somehow existed today, in a modern climate, most scientists agree it likely couldn't survive. Earth simply isn't hot enough anymore to support a cold-blooded animal of that size. Global average tropical temperatures have dropped enough since the Paleocene that even the hottest surviving rainforests on Earth today would fall short of what a snake this size would need to regulate its body temperature and sustain its metabolism. Which means this creature wasn't just the biggest snake in history, it was a direct product of a specific narrow climate window that no longer exists on this planet, making it not just enormous, but genuinely unrepeatable. A one-time biological event Earth is unlikely to produce again. So the next time someone dismisses old sea serpent stories as pure fantasy, you can tell them the truth. Something exactly like that really did exist. It just came 58 million years too early and left its bones in a coal mine in Colombia as the only proof it was ever real. Comment what you think would happen if Titanoboa faced a modern saltwater crocodile. And if prehistoric monsters that turned out to be real keep you up at night, subscribe, because next week we're going even deeper.